Today, Milly Molly Mandy goes to the sea. Once upon a time, what do you think? Milly Molly Mandy was going to be taken to the seaside. Milly Molly Mandy had never seen the sea in all her life before. Imagine such a thing. And ever since Mother came back from her seaside holiday with her friend Mrs. Hooker and told Milly Molly Mandy about the splashy waves and the sand and the little crabs, don't usually find little crabs on sand, you find those in rock pools. Milly Molly Mandy had just longed to go there herself. Father and Mother and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle and Auntie just longed for her to go too, because they knew she'd like it so much, but they were all so busy. And then, you know, holidays cost quite a lot of money. So Milly Molly Mandy played seaside instead by the little brook in the meadow with little friend Susan and Billy Blunt and the shells Mother had brought home for her. And it was a very nice game indeed. But still Milly Molly Mandy did wish sometimes it could be the real sea. Then one day little friend Susan went with her mother and baby sister to stay with a relation who let lodgings by the sea. And little friend Susan wrote Milly Molly Mandy a postcard saying how lovely it was and how she did wish Milly Molly Mandy was there. And Mrs. Moggs wrote Mother a postcard saying couldn't some of them manage to come down just for a day excursion one Saturday? Father and Mother and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle and Auntie thought something really ought to be done about that. And they talked it over while Milly Molly Mandy listened with all her ears. But Father said he couldn't go because he had to get his potatoes up. That'll be October now, or maybe they're early. Mother said she couldn't go because it was a baking day, and besides she'd just had a lovely seaside holiday. Grandpa said he couldn't go because it was market day, and Grandma said she wasn't really very fond of train journeys. Uncle said he oughtn't to leave his cows and chickens. And then they all said Auntie could quite well leave the sweeping and dusting for that one day. So Auntie only said it seemed too bad that she should have all the fun. And then she and Milly Molly Mandy hugged each other because it was so very exciting. Milly Molly Mandy ran off to tell Billy Blunt at once because she felt she'd burst if she didn't tell someone. And Billy Blunt did wish he would be going too, but his father and mother were always busy. Milly Molly Mandy told Auntie, and Auntie said, "Tell his mother, tell Billy Blunt to ask his mother to let him come with us, and I'll look after him." So Billy Blunt did, and Mrs. Blunt said it was very kind of Auntie, and she'd be pleased to let him go. Milly Molly Mandy hoppity-skipped like anything because she was so very pleased, and Billy Blunt was very pleased too, though he didn't hoppity-skip because he thought he was too old for such things. So now they were able to plan together for Saturday, which made it much more fun. Mother had an old bathing dress which she cut down to fit Milly Molly Mandy, and the bits over she made into a flower for the shoulder, and it looked a very smart bathing dress indeed. Billy Blunt borrowed a swimming suit from another boy at school, but it hadn't any flower on the shoulder. Of course not. Then Billy Blunt said to Milly Molly Mandy, "If you've got swimming suits, you ought to swim. We'd better practice." But Milly Molly Mandy said, "We haven't got enough water." And Billy Blunt said, "Practice in the air then. Better than nothing." So they fetched 2 old boxes from the barn out into the yard, and they lay on them, on their fronts, and spread out their arms and kicked with their legs, just as if they were swimming. And when Uncle came along to fetch a wheelbarrow, he said it really made him feel quite cool to see them. There's Billy Blunt practicing swimming. He showed them how to turn their hands properly and kept calling out, "Steady, steady, not so fast," as he watched them. And then Uncle lay on his front on the box and showed them how. And he looked so funny. And then they tried again. And Uncle said it was better that time. So they practiced until they were quite out of breath. And then they pretended to dive off the boxes. And they splashed and swallowed mouthfuls of air and swam races to the gate and shivered and dried themselves with old sacks. It was almost as much fun as if it were real water. Well, Saturday came at last, and Auntie and Milly Molly Mandy met Billy Blunt at 9 o'clock by the crossroads. And then they went in the red bus to the station in the next town. And then they went in the train, rub-de-dump, all the way down to the sea. You can't imagine how exciting it was when they got out at last to walk down a road knowing they'd see the real sea at the bottom. Milly Molly Mandy got so excited she didn't want to look until they were quite close. So Billy Blunt, who'd seen it once before, pulled her along right onto the edge of the sand, and then he said suddenly, "Now look!" And MillyMollyMandy looked, and there was the sea, all jumping with sparkles in the sunshine as far as ever you could see, and little friend Susan, with bare legs and frock tucked up, came tearing over the sand to meet them from where Mrs. Moggs and Billy Moggs were sitting by a wooden breakwater. Wasn't it fun? There's Susan coming to meet them, look. I don't think Susan's got a hat. That's the first. They took off their shoes and their socks and their hats, and they wanted to take off their clothes and bathe, but Auntie said they must have dinner first. So they sat round and ate sandwiches and cake and fruit, which Auntie had brought in a basket. And the Moggses had theirs too, out of a basket. And then they played in the sand with baby Moggs, who liked having her legs buried, and paddled a bit and found crabs. They didn't take them away from the water, though. And then Auntie and Mrs. Moggs said they might bathe now if they wanted to. So as it was a very quiet sort of beach, MillyMollyMandy undressed behind Auntie, and little friend Susan undressed behind Mrs. Moggs, and Billy Blunt undressed behind the breakwater. And then they ran right into the water in their bathing dresses, and little friend Susan thought MillyMollyMandy's bathing dress was smart with that flower on the shoulder. There we are. And I bet when you thought, when I said there was no flower on Billy Blunt's shoulder, you thought he wouldn't have a strap. But he has, you see. Boys used to have suits like that. I think Grandpa probably did you? Yes, Grandpa's nodding. But dear me, water swimming feels so different from land swimming, and MillyMollyMandy couldn't manage at all well with the little waves splashing up at her all the time. Billy Blunt swished about in the water with a very grim face and looked exactly as if he were swimming. When MillyMollyMandy asked him, he said, "No, my arms swim, but my legs only walk." That was honest of him, wasn't it? It was queer, for it had seemed quite easy in the barnyard. But they went on pretending and pretending to swim, until Auntie called them out. And then they dried themselves with towels and got into their clothes again. And Billy Blunt said, well, anyhow, he supposed they were just that much nearer swimming properly than they were before. And MillyMollyMandy said she supposed next time they might perhaps be able to lift their feet off the ground for a minute at any rate. And little friend Susan said she was sure she'd swallowed a shrimp, but that was only her fun. Then they played and explored among the rock pools and had tea on the sand. And after tea, Mrs. Moggs and baby Moggs and little friend Susan walked with them back to the station. And Auntie and MillyMollyMandy and Billy Blunt went in the train, rumpty-dump, rumpty-dump, all the way home again. And MillyMollyMandy was so sleepy when she got to the nice white cottage with the thatched roof that she had only just time to kiss Father and Mother and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle and Auntie good night and get into bed before she fell fast asleep. But she did have a lot to talk about next day. I'd have been asleep on the train. That's it for today.